ladies and gentlemen, my name is Kevin Jekowitz. This is the Kaged Review, and this is my continuing series of reviewing all the MCU and DCEU movies. And we are up to the beginning of Phase 2 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It has been very cool how they've interconnected everything. And you start Phase 2 with the end of the very first series that they started with, of course, Iron Man. So Iron Man 3, directed by Shane Black, was kind of a controversial movie for a lot of people. And clearly for the people who were into the Iron Man comics, I'll be honest, I'm not familiar with a lot of the Iron Man enemies. I have a couple of Iron Man comics, but I never dove in to Marvel the way I did DC. And so I don't really have a lot to go by, so kind of prefacing this review with that. The Mandarin, I didn't really have the gist of who the Mandarin was at that point. I have a little better understanding of who he is now, but back then when this movie came out, not so much. So you have, of course, Robert Downey Jr. returning as Tony Stark. You have Gwyneth Paltrow returning as Pepper Potts. Jon Favreau as Happy Hogan. You have Don Cheadle coming back as James Rhodey, War Machine, Iron Patriot. So here, the main antagonist is really divisive. Like, there were a lot of people that were super pissed about this. Let's start talking about how the movie starts. You get Tony Stark. He's, right after the events of New York and, taking the bomb up a wormhole and having to fight an alien race with the Avengers. And so he's having panic attacks now. He's got some PTSD going on. And really is just like focusing in on his work to help distract him. He can't sleep at night. There's a great conversation between him and Pepper Potts where he's trying to explain, that he can't sleep, and then he's burying himself in his work. And that comes back later in the movie in a major, major way. So you start getting these little clips, these vignettes from this guy called the Mandarin. He's on TV, and he's kind of like this Osama bin Laden type personality. He's taking out American land points and American people, and just basically starting this like war on America. And Ben Kingsley plays the Mandarin, and Ben Kingsley is a great actor, just a phenomenal actor. This guy really shows some range in this movie, and we'll get into the range here in a few minutes, but I thought it was very cool. Another guy that you have in here is Aldrich Killian, played by Guy Pearce. Guy Pearce is another really, really good actor. So when you first see Aldrich, he's trying to get Tony Stark and this other female scientist that he's like kind of dating like 10 or 20 years ago. And he's trying to get them to, maybe help fund his project. So you get a scene where kind of Tony Stark says, "I'll meet you on the roof in a few minutes," and of course just kind of leaves him there so he can go off with this chick. And it's like his past coming back to haunt him. And so what inevitably happens is Aldrich Killian goes to Pepper Potts because now she owns Stark Industries, and he shows her Extremis, which is this like it's a chemically and genetically altering DNA, so people can like grow parts back and heal their bodies. But what they don't tell you right away is that Extremis has some pretty severe side effects, and not everybody lives through the process. So you've got a couple of those things going on simultaneously. Happy Hogan, who is head of security for Stark Industries, decides to follow one of Guy Pearce's little foot soldiers. Guy calls himself Savin in the movie, played by James Badge Dale, who was actually really, really good. He was a smaller role, but I thought he had some really good facial inflections, and it's kind of like Hugo Weaving with Red Skull, where you get these little facial tics because he's actually wearing a face mask that's a human face. Kind of something like that. So yeah, Happy, he follows them, and there's a big fight because he gets found out, and then you see one of these extremist soldiers blow up, and that is the side effect. It creates this ability to create massive amounts of heat, and unfortunately, some of them create so much heat they just explode. And so they put Happy in the hospital. Now Tony Stark is really pissed off, and he sends a message to the Mandarin and actually gives his address to where they come in choppers and blow up his mansion, which was a very, very cool scene, like really, really great scene. And then, so now they're on the manhunt. Now Tony Stark has to kind of infiltrate wherever the Mandarin is. And one thing I really, really, really loved about this movie is you see what makes Tony Stark so special. It's not the suit, it's the fact that he can think, and he's very good at engineering things. And there was a point where he had no suits, and so he goes into a hardware store and buys, so like electrical things and some fertilizer and stuff, and he makes bombs and like tasers, homemade tasers and stuff, just through all this stuff from the store. And it's like you get to see him kind of MacGyver things, and you really see that Tony Stark is special because of his mind and what he can do with it. And see, he goes through this like enemy camp, takes out a bunch of soldiers with these like makeshift weapons, and then you find out that the Mandarin is actually kind of a red herring. Like, the Mandarin himself, the guy you saw on TV, played by Ben Kingsley, in the movie is actually an actor. And Ben Kingsley, when he's found out, it's funny because he's got this really dark, gritty voice, when he's playing the Mandarin, and then he's just this English goofball when they find out he's actually just an actor. And that's why I say Ben Kingsley is so cool and kind of diverse in this movie, because he plays the Mandarin and he plays the guy playing the Mandarin. And it was two completely different roles, honestly. It was very, very cool. So yeah, that was all the brainchild of Aldrich Killian in a way to set up this like arms race that he's trying to build. And of course, he wants to capitalize on that. So they figure out everything, and then there's this big standoff at the end. And one of the really cool things about the end fight was there was a bunch of extremist soldiers made by Aldrich Killian. And you find out that Tony Stark, through all his long, restless nights and digging into his work, has made like 100 Iron Man suits. Some with different capabilities too. And it was very cool. So they all fly in, and there's this huge battle between all of these Iron Man Mark whatevers and then the extremist soldiers. And it was incredibly, incredibly well done. So one of the main things that leads up to this big battle, though, at the end, though, was the fact that Aldrich Killian took Pepper Potts captive and gave her the extremist serum. And so you don't know if Pepper Potts is going to live, die, turn into a super badass. You never know. And then, here she is at this compound where this big fight is happening. And there's a moment where she's kind of like on this very, very high scaffolding, and there's a pit of fire below her. And Tony Stark saying, "You got to jump, I'll catch you," because he has to, try to get her. And instead, the scaffolding kind of falls apart, and she just falls 200 feet into the fire. So obviously, you think that Pepper Potts is dead. And so there was that big moment there, and then you can see how Tony is just now pissed, and he's going to kill the Mandarin. So there's this kind of epic fight between Aldrich Killian, Tony Stark. They wind up on the ground eventually. Aldrich Killian at one point was like caught in one of Iron Man's suits. Like he had the suit kind of surround Aldrich Killian and exploded. And so he falls down, and of course, the guy's like superpowered anyway, and he's half fire. So it hurts him, but it doesn't kill him. He gets up out of the fire. He's walking toward Tony Stark, and then gets smacked off screen by Pepper Potts, who is now one of these extremist soldiers, basically. She's got all these, like, powers, like incredible strength and agility, and so turns Pepper Potts into just an absolute badass. And she is actually the one who takes out Aldrich Killian. And it was a great part because Robert Downey Jr. He's sitting there and he's like, I got nothing. It was really funny. And now, just so you guys know, through my own research, Pepper Potts does have moments in the comics where they do alter her. And apparently there was a storyline that was somewhat similar to this in the comics where Pepper Potts gets some superpowers like this. So I didn't know that, but I looked it up and I thought that was really interesting. So, just a key point. So it was really fun, man. Like, there were big issues apparently with the character of the Mandarin. People didn't like what they did with that character at all. Unfortunately, I was not familiar with that character, so I didn't have that, like, oh my god, what are they doing type scenario. One thing I will say though about that, I like the idea of Aldrich Killian having this like red herring with the Mandarin, and like it allows him to create, this arms race. I like that. I think the story is cool there. My actual issue with it is that Ben Kingsley is such a fucking good actor that he was better than Guy Pearce as Aldrich Killian. And so, really, the more compelling story was the Mandarin. And when you go in there and you find out that he's just an actor, that's the part that, to me, was the letdown, because you had something really gripping with the Mandarin going on. And really, to me, that was like the holy shit enemy of this movie until they changed it up and you find out he's just an actor. So to me, that was the only problem that I had with it personally, because like I said, I just don't know, about the Mandarin that much. So that was the only issue I had. One other key character that I do want to mention in here, because he does show up later in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is there is a kid. Tony Stark is in Tennessee. He got flown after the big explosion where they blew up his house. And so he's in this Iron Man suit that flies him to Tennessee. And he goes into this like barn. And, so he could stash his Iron Man suit and try to figure out the next step. And this kid comes in there. And, he tries to figure out who's in his barn. And it was Ty Simpkins as Harley Keener. The kid was named Harley Keener. And so Harley is trying to help out Iron Man and stuff. And they form this cool little bond throughout the movie. And I only mention that because, like I said, he comes back later in the series. So I wanted to throw that in there. So Iron Man, like, there were a couple of issues I had with it that aren't necessarily big issues, but they were issues that I had. At the beginning of the movie, you have Happy Hogan, who takes over head of security for Stark Industries. And he's just so over the top and goofy, and it just, like, kind of took me out of the movie. And I get that there was kind of a reason for him being over the top and following guys, so he gets hurt. But it was just a little too campy for me. And the other thing is, like I said, you've got two main villains here, or at least you think you have two main villains here, and one of them turns out to be a very, very good, compelling villain, and then they just switch it up and he's a joke. And the real villain is Aldrich Killian, played by Guy Pearce. And they're both really, really good actors. I really like both actors, especially Guy Pearce in Memento was just absolutely amazing. Love that movie, and I love that role. But Ben Kingsley is another level, dude, and he was very, very good in this movie. So, that just kind of, it did have its effect, negative. And that's my only takeaway from it. I still thought it was a really good movie. I think the end action sequence when you have all the Iron Man suits taking on all the Extremist shoulders was very visually stunning. I thought that was very good. So the very end of the movie, Robert Downey Jr., Tony Stark, he has an operation to take all the fragments away from his heart. And so now he doesn't have to have this thing on his chest anymore. And he figures out how to fix Pepper Potts. And so they go on, healthy, happy, ever after, and that's the end of the movie. So, very, very good. I really did enjoy it. I still, this is a movie that I would probably put a little less than all the character introduction movies. You know, the Thor one, the Captain America one, the Iron Man one wasn't as good as those, but it was still very, very fun and entertaining. So with that, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Really, really enjoyable. Definitely above average. So I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave it. So ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. My name is Kevin Jackowitz, Kaged Nation, out.